Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Innovation Conversation. Today we are joined by Benjamin Whitby. Benjamin, welcome to the podcast.
Ricardo, thank you so much for having me.
And it's a pleasure having you here. Benjamin, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. Uh, my name is Benjamin Whitby. I am a technologist, quantum physicist, investment banker, 20 years in capital markets, and been in the crypto space since rabbit hole 2013, full times 2017.
So, did you ever buy a pizza with the Bitcoin, or?
No, I never ever got to kind of do anything that kind of crazy, but yeah, the rabbit hole moment for me was when I was still working at HSBC, and one of our staff put 50 Canadian dollars into RoboCoin ATM, which was the world's first ATM in Bitcoin, and I ended up having to go and sort that out, walk the guy around the car park, then read the white paper, and just had the most kind of amazing kind of revelation how you see forwards with technology and you can see where things are going to go, and
Mhm.
just saw that all of capital markets was going to tokenize. Saw this in 2013, and then spent 4 years in HSBC trying to get them to move the needle before then kind of going full time into crypto in 2017, and now launched our latest protocol, which is a cross chain protocol. So it's really exciting.
So, I guess what prompted you to make a move from investment banking in a more traditional role to the crypto space?
So I started my career in early 2000s, late 1999, early 2000s, and I ended up kind of working for one of the biggest Lloyd's of London, so the biggest insurance market in the world. We did all the Y2K challenges there, and whilst I was there, having come out of university, having access to the internet, to then come into the working world and being told, no, you can't access the internet, no, you can't have email, no, you have to use Lotus Notes. I was like, this is like going back in time. And, obviously then we went through Web 1.0 and email, the web kind of, and the internet kind of propagated through all of our industry. And I felt that the same kind of position, I was seeing the same kind of position with Bitcoin in 2013 with this. It was like, right, here we now have something that is going to make the internet able to operate with digitally scarce assets, which is
Mhm.
really important. So for my generation, we grew up kind of copying cassettes and CDs and MP3s and things like that. And you just got used to being able to share digital assets around with everybody. And to have something that is digitally scarce,
Mhm.
absolute game changer. I was like, this is going to change capital markets forever, which is really why I persisted with HSBC for so long, because I thought it's going to be now. They're going to see it. They're going to see it. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. But they chose either not to see it, or they were moving too slowly. And I just got quite bored and decided that it was an opportunity that was too big to miss,
Mhm.
and therefore had to kind of jump in with both feet, because you only really get one life in terms of doing what you're doing, and you have to be doing something that you absolutely fundamentally believe in.
So, I guess you can almost call yourself an accidental entrepreneur, in the sense that you had a very well established career in life and then you moved to the crypto space. A wise move, by the way, but at the time, I guess it must have felt quite scary, you know?
Yeah, it was quite scary. I did 8 years at HSBC. I had a great network. Before that, I was with PwC and Accenture, and I thought actually people would kind of understand where this was going and would see through the noise and see to the technology.
Hmm.
Um, and then obviously we had a couple of good years, and then a couple of really really tough years
Yeah.
with like 2021 to 2024. Really now, up until when kind of all the regulators in the US are going to change, we had to endure Operation Choke Point, and really it's being made to feel like a criminal because you're building technology that is going to change the world, and it just feels wrong at so many different levels. But yeah, you do. You have to kind of embrace and I think take what you know and then reach for something new.
When you told your peers that you're going to move into the crypto space and blockchain space, how did they react to that back in?
Bitcoin hit 20K for the very first time
Yeah,
when I resigned, and they were like, "Wow, it's going to be amazing! It's going to go up forever." And it was like, "Well, that's just not going to really happen." Um, and then obviously we went through the doldrums in the Bitcoin space. So I think about 6 months after I'd resigned and kind of come out into the space, we were down at $3,000-4,000 per Bitcoin, which now seems like why didn't I buy so much more Bitcoin and
yeah.
so much more crypto? And the answer is you can never have too much. But the reality of kind of getting engaged in this space is significantly high risk, right? So you've got all the benefit, all the challenges of traditional entrepreneurial activity layered on top with the fact that it's really difficult to get a bank account. It's really difficult to operate. It's really difficult to launch a token. It's really difficult because it's all been structured in such a way that there have been so many barriers put in front up until this point about progressing this technology forwards that it's only now coming into this next wave of regulatory oversight that I am truly excited for how this industry is going to accelerate.
You launch also your own project now, which is Governor, if I got the name correctly. Can you tell me
Yeah,
a bit more about it? How does that work?
yeah. I mean, so again, it's a journey of frustrations and awareness and an observation of the gaps that exist within the current technology space. And so, one of the challenges when I came out of HSBC and kind of did this first DeFi project was that actually we didn't have governance over our own assets. As a team, we didn't have governance over those. We had the ability to be sovereign, self sovereign, as in, you know your private key, I know my private key. We've got the ability to sign, and as people in the investment banking space know and will have experienced, we all got these RSA tags that kind of generated codes at a certain kind of frequency, and you then kind of had to type in your unique code. And so we were very used to kind of being able to coordinate things, knowing that we were submitting something that we could effectively sign without being the full sole holder of those assets.
Hmm.
And in corporations, you need to have for a signature, for a overview, multiple signatures, multiple sign-offs. And in the early days of crypto, we never had that. So there were two kind of real innovations that came through. One was the innovation of the multi-sig technology. And secondly, there was the innovation of MPC technology. And MPC technology stands for multi-party computation. And with the combination of all these different technology pieces and different layers, we can now, in the crypto space, put a structure and framework in place that means that we can represent and reflect the same processes that happen within corporate structures today and investment banks through the social engagement, but do that on a technology basis as well. And then once we've done that with people, how can we then empower and give AI agents the ability to go off and hold their own keys and be effectively self-sovereign? So you can build a completely autonomous agent as a smart contract on the blockchain, enable that with a key infrastructure that allows them to generate, create, control different addresses, different assets on the blockchain. And that's effectively what Governor is. It's a framework that enables self-sovereign control from all different types of users and different kind of endpoints, including AIs and user agents,
Hmm.
and enables you to control absolutely any asset on any blockchain. Now that's really important. That's really important because these blockchains, when they exist, they come into life and they become islands of liquidity. So you
Hmm.
have the assets that exist on Ethereum, you have the assets that exist on Solana, on Solana. Those two worlds do not talk to each other. Now, we're getting to a point where I believe, with the forthcoming changes and regulations, that enterprises will be launching their own blockchains. And we've already seen this with Sony. We've seen this with a number of different blockchain companies like Coinbase and Kraken, where they've launched and they're operating now their own permissionless blockchains. So these blockchains being called dApp chains, and if we have the same types of problems and challenges with those dApp chains being islands of liquidity, then it makes it very difficult to do composable transactions. And it's almost as if you're a tourist and you land in a new country, that without a credit card or a payment rail, the first thing that you've got to do is you've got to go and take your local home currency and do a conversion into the currency of that national state. So if you go to Ireland, you maybe need to change from English pounds to Irish pounds. If you go to France, you need to change from English pounds to euros. And that conversion to that kind of new currency position is the first thing that you've got to do before you can do anything. So before you can go and have coffee and a croissant in France, you've got to have euros. Now, Governor effectively makes it frictionless for anybody to come and take their existing pounds and go and purchase a coffee and a croissant in France, in Paris, without having to do that dance of currency exchange and movement, etc., etc. And what's really, really important on this is that of all of these chains, we have Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is today 60% market dominance. 60% of all value in crypto exists within the Bitcoin ecosystem at this moment in time. And there is no way to utilize that value without going through some kind of wrapping or exchange process at this moment in time. Which sounds fine until you realize that the local governments that have existed in this space have been writing regulations about income tax, capital gains tax, transfer and exchange of assets. And so they see at this point in time, if we go back to I've got pounds, I want euros to buy a coffee and a croissant, they see that transaction where you're taking your pounds and turning it into euros to do that transaction to buy that coffee and croissant. They see that transaction as a transaction that unlocks capital gains requirements, which means that you lose an awful lot of your value when you're going between these different chains as a retail user, as a corporate user, or potentially as an AI user. You're incurring all sorts of different risks and challenges. And so what Governor does is it enables you to avoid in so many different ways through collateralization and generating loans against your assets, the ability to unlock value without incurring capital gains costs, income costs, etc., because of the way that you're using your assets. And importantly, probably most importantly, it's a way of making sure that you're staying self-sovereign.
Okay, so you enable people to make the payments in whatever, I guess, currency they wish to do so. And by converting, do you also convert to fiat, or how does it work? Or is it just
We're not
crypto?
touching fiat at this moment in time. In order to do fiat, you do need to be kind of a regulated entity. That's one of the things that is very clear. You need to make sure that you're doing KYC, and we're just operating within the DeFi space. So the positions really are trying to forward look again and say, right, okay, well, we're going to come to a position where, and there are two big risks. The first is that we create an environment that makes it impossible for AI agents to go off and do various different things. Now, if you've got an action that you want to go off and do, you don't want your AI agent to get stuck or blocked. You want to be able to empower them to travel through the entire kind of block sphere and different blockchains without kind of having problems. So the ability to create addresses on all of these different blockchains in a programmatic fashion is really important. The second thing to kind of watch and worry about is the way that we have defaulted into use of bridges today. And bridges in this space have proved to be very successful, proved to be very popular, and are being used by people that do not understand the risks. And I always pick on the Arbitrum team, and I love the Arbitrum team because I think they've got one of the best DAO frameworks out there at the moment. But if I use the Arbitrum bridge as an example, as it stands today, they have got around about $3.5 billion worth of ETH on their bridge. Now that bridge is secured by a 9 of 12 multi-sig run by the Security Council of the Arbitrum Foundation. At some point, when ETH finally comes out of the doldrums, that $3 billion worth of value, say ETH 3x's in the next cycle, could become close to $10 billion. And that means that every single user that is holding and securing that contract is effectively securing $1 billion worth of value. Now, at some point, the monetary value of the assets that they are holding eclipses the risk of going and attacking any one of those 9 people. And so Governor flips that on its head and allows individual users to create and control assets, not through a centralized bridge that holds $10 billion worth of value, but to enable 8 billion people to hold $1 worth of value on their own bridge, as it were. So it really flips it on its head. And the attack vector in terms of the cryptography, attacking a bridge with a small amount of assets in there, is exactly the same as attacking a bridge with a large amount of assets in there, apart from the maths is the same, but the social element is very different. So the social element is you need to attack one person and you'll unlock maybe $100 worth of assets. Whereas if you attack the bridge holders, you attack one person and you unlock $10 million worth of assets. There's a very asymmetric risk that you're addressing there. And so Governor helps us move towards a much, much lower reduced risk model than currently exists with bridges.
And how did you come up with this idea?
First principles thinking. I mean, I studied physics for my degree, and I always like to kind of deconstruct things back into their first principles. It's something that we're all kind of taught to do as scientists, and kind of go back and find truth and then evidence that truth. And yeah, it's always good to go back and challenge.
Was it challenging, launching the idea, getting to the point where it is now? Or did you actually find a lot of people in the community saying, you know what, I believe in this, I'm going to support this 100%?
It's actually been really challenging. It's been really challenging from the people that we know, the angel community that we know, that we've met in London and in various different other parts of the world now, after nearly 8 years in the crypto space. It's been relatively easy to get involved in kind of that first tier of funding. In terms of the next stage in funding, actually incredibly hard, because we're faced with an environment where we have these amazing crypto assets that are still significantly undervalued compared to what they will do in society. And, if you're talking to a venture capital firm and they're sitting on a various different size of portfolio, they're maybe not necessarily at this point in the cycle looking for that outsized risk. They might want to just so they've got $10 million that they've got on their tickets to write tickets for. They might just decide, actually, we're just going to put this into Bitcoin for the next 12 months, ride it through 3-4x where we've got to, and then take profits out. And so it's a very difficult time to convince people to kind of walk away from a 3-4x position until they've had that liquidity moment. So I think that the market will start to free up in 2025, but maybe not towards the end of 2025. And the challenge is that you would have come across this previously. Good ideas don't wait, right? If you wait, and wait for the funding opportunities to be right. Somebody else will have built your product.
It's a good point. I was just about to ask you one thing, which is I talk with a lot of entrepreneurs, and there's always that element of madness in whatever new thing they're trying to build and develop. And how do you manage that yourself? How do you manage that fine line between I'm doing something new and that's never been done before, and this is sheer madness to even try and do this in the first place? How do you balance that?
Just moved, just getting sunlight in my eyes. How, I don't know, you just kind of screw it, just do it. It's just, you've just got to build and just kind of, as long as you've got a financial plan that kind of broadly points you in the right direction, you've always got to shoot, in terms of an entrepreneurial position, I think you've always got to shoot for the biggest target that you possibly can, whether that's users, whether that's assets, whether that's kind of the position in terms of the goal of launching a rocket that gets to Mars. You've got to have that big end vision. And so for Governor, the vision's pretty big. It's unlock all $1 trillion worth of assets in the crypto space so that a single chain, the smallest chain, can use $3 trillion worth of assets. So you
Oh,
can launch your smart contract on the smallest chain and utilize $3 trillion worth of liquidity without having to go and attract liquidity. Because when all of these new different chains launch, they want two things. They want eyeballs and users and developers coming into that position. Now, if you can take away the friction of one of those things, you're going to win. And we did the numbers in terms of the burn rate. We did the numbers in terms of the opportunity cost and the opportunity that was on the table. We need a tiny, tiny fraction of all of those assets, like 0.301 of those assets. And we've tremendously successful. So it's an opportunity that really kind of needs to be played out. I think that, again, the layers of experience, the layers of technology that I've encountered through my career, it all points to this direction. It really kind of has led me up until this point.
what do you think your old pals at HSBC would say if this year now?
I mean, I hope they're engaged in the crypto space. I hope they're lobbying internally to do interesting projects, tokenizing assets. I think they are. I think a lot of them have moved on to various different other projects. There's a lot of movement with the Santander team. There's a lot of movement with the UBS team. JP Morgan has got a really great team, kind of making some really great strides. And no matter what Jamie would say, the staff get it. The senior management get it. There's an asymmetric risk there as well in terms of the regulations that have been in place by Gary Gensler have been downside risk against going against the SEC is too great considering the business that they have on their books at this moment in time. What has been frustrating for me has been the attack on the space from the regulators against the upstarts that are coming through.
That brings me to my next question, which is how do you, let's say I'm a newcomer in the crypto space, I don't get the blockchain, all those things. How do you separate between what's good, what's not so good? Because there's been many cases where people look at it and say, "Oh my God, this has been a complete scam," but in reality, there's actually quite a lot of applications, and we know for a fact that very powerful applications are being created nowadays. So how do you, when you look at things, how are you able to separate between what's really good and what's an absolute scam?
It's really hard. It's really, really, and the position comes at two different levels as well, because you've not only got the challenge of the project and how much funding that they might have and the idea, but also you've got this new dynamic, and the funding is great, right? I mean, I was at PwC before HSBC, and kind of was at PwC just as kind of Sarbanes-Oxley was coming through, and kind of like all that kind of was coming to the table. And then obviously Lehman happened, and that was a really kind of groundbreaking moment. But there were scams even in that position. So the best regulation is not going to stop the scams. We can list Lehman as a really good example in terms of that was a giant scam. We can say Bernie Madoff.
Yeah.
That was a massive scam that the regulators signed off for many, 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 many years before it kind of bubbled up and actually kind of the emperor was called out for wearing no clothes. In terms of how do you determine if a crypto project is a scam or not? It's really difficult. It's really difficult. The position that's currently in MICA tries to put a framework together that means that you can move forwards with a little bit more confidence.
Hmm.
But for me, it fundamentally comes down to: do you have a team that you can identify? Are they real people? Because it gives you a great deal more confidence than having an undoxed ghost team. Do you have technology that's legitimate, that's been verified and tested at some level at some stage? And then do you have a market that's receptive to actually receiving this product? Because if your market isn't there, or the market is being actively regulated against you, then you're never going to have a market to sell into. But I think now we're getting to a stage where we are going to see more legitimate projects coming through, because a lot of the projects that were launched in 2018, 2019, a lot of those were exceptionally early projects that ultimately ended up not returning value to users and consumers. But now we're ending up with a position where you can start to engage in these projects as an end user in a way that you couldn't necessarily easily get involved with traditional early stage venture. So, the whole Sarbanes-Oxley thing that happened after Enron really kind of raised the stakes in terms of the IPO game, and has meant that it's really kept normal people out of that investment, that early stage risk taking. So only accredited investors have been able to kind of access entrepreneurial risk. That's meant that only VCs have entered. Really, IPOs have been a last resort that have been taken after a product has demonstrated to reach product market fit and kind of launched into the market with users, etc. And I always remember going back to some of the kind of the classic books that I recommend that people read, and one of them.
Which ones? Which ones do you recommend?
I mean, it's all the classics. So it's all kind of stuff like the Lean Startup, the 0 to 1,
Hmm.
Hard Things About Hard Things, and it's in Hard Things About Hard Things where they talk about this journey that they were going through with the cloud-based company, where they literally had days worth of runway left and they had to do an IPO. And you think, that's just insane to be able to say, look, we're going to go to market and we're going to launch an IPO to
Hmm.
raise capital for a new venture. You tell
It's a
people
bit
that
crazy.
now and they're like, that's not what an IPO is for. An IPO is for to provide exit liquidity for the
Hmm.
VCs and all of the employees that have worked there and put sweat equity in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And because of that, we've got a very kind of channeled position in terms of the funding market. The funding market had doubled down in terms of Silicon Valley and lots of different activity being launched out of Silicon Valley, because they were the people that were able to understand and assess the risks, cycle that capital through from their exits into their new fundraising activity. And it meant that it was pulling teams into Silicon Valley.
Hmm.
So I hope that now we're entering this new kind of token forward, token market economy, that teams around the world will be able to put good ideas onto the table, get funded from people all around the world, and solve problems in a much more dynamic way, that can not just be software but can also be hardware as well, because atoms are much harder than bits.
So you see the future as a bright, bright thing
Yeah,
about to happen.
definitely, definitely. I mean, I think anybody that exists in the space in terms of wanting to kind of engage in technology has to be an optimist first and foremost. Either that or crazy, or one or the other.
One of those two things, right? Ben, if people want to reach out to you, how can they do so? What's the best way?
So I am on Twitter mainly. My Twitter is Benjamin J Whitby, and I'm open for all DMs. People can kind of contact me, ask me. The project name that we're running with is Governor DAO. It's GVNR DAO, and yeah, we're really excited to kind of bring it to market and make sure that we can do something that's really impactful and not only helps users and individuals engage, but also teams, builders, developers, and new blockchains. So, we hope that we are the first team that people come to when they launch a new chain. So they won't be desperate to launch a bridge and just try and attract one source of liquidity. They'll connect into the governor network and access all liquidity.
Sounds good. Ben, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Der